So it's 3 o'clock or a little after. If everybody will find a seat, we'll get started. So we're going to be here from 3 to 5 today. We have an agenda we'll follow fairly closely, I hope. Everybody can hear me in the back? I'm Claudia Miller. I'm with UNM Planning and Campus Development. I work in helping plan campuses, plan facilities, and I work a lot with the branch campuses, so I'm very familiar with Taos. I've been coming up here for the last 4 or 5 years, maybe. So I've been asked to sort of facilitate this meeting. We're going to do an overview of how capital projects work through the UNM with the state, through the funding mechanisms, planning processes, and on forward to talk about some of the specific projects that you see going on all around you. So Dr. Kate O'Neill is going to make an introduction, and then we'll dive in. I don't know how to advance this thing.
Thank you, Toddy. Appreciate it. Thank you, all of you, for being here. And thank you, Enrico and Louis, for videotaping this. I know I heard from a number of people who couldn't actually be here in person. But thank you for tuning in via the web. And we are responding to a couple of things. One is just that we are finally at the point of being able to break ground on some projects. It's been about 3 to 4 years since we've been able to do that, other than some portables. And there's some reasons for that you'll hear about that Toddy will explain in terms of the whole process of capital funding and how that works. But also we just released Saturday, Dr. Winograd and Dr. Delgado-Riley sent out the strategic plan. You can link to that at their website at CEPR, C-E-P-R. And I think Anita sent out an email with that link as well. Also, I think Louis put a link on our website to the CEPR website, so you can see that strategic plan. Today's discussion is specifically about facilities and capital projects. We have a couple of big variables, as many of you know. One is the GEO bond in November. There's $4 million in there for Health Sciences Training Center. If that passes or not, that's a big variable. And then depending on that, as many of you know, the town of Taos approached us and asked if we would be interested in basically refurbishing Baton and Rio Grande Hall. So that decision won't happen until after the GEO bond is known one way or the other. So those are two huge variables. So the purpose today is to pretty much catch you up to date, give you a sense of where we're at, what's been happening, and also just educational so that people understand the process. I think there's really an opportunity here to really help people understand just how involved main campus is in these processes, and that it goes all the way up through the state, the higher ed department. As I mentioned the other day, even the governor who directs the State Board of Finance gets to weigh in on whether we get to do an addition to this building. So I just want to thank you all again for being here, and I really want to thank Toddy Miller for being here and Eric for being here from UNM Main Campus Capital Projects. They represent a whole team of people in IT, furniture, space planning, funding. It's pretty amazing how many folks are involved. But also want to thank Jim Pollard, our project director, who's here with us as well. And with that, thank you again. I'm going to turn it back to Toddy.
I think I may ask Kate to jump in a little bit on the beginning here, because basically when we start to do facilities planning, we want to make sure that we're taking into account the place and its mission for education. And that's sort of the beginning part. And I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't already know. Taos campus has been growing at leaps and bounds. Your enrollment figures have been climbing, as have your head counts. So that sort of puts the pressure on all of us. We feel those pains of our own successes. So UNM appreciates how well the Taos branch has been succeeding in not only enrollment but graduation rates. These things also become multiply important in helping guiding how you plan for a campus, but also beginning to have some input from the state of New Mexico. Oh, hi, Rudy. Okay, there's also some other markers that we look for now, because the state of New Mexico is beginning to say we have to show our successes in more meaningful ways of outcomes. That's sort of a newer trend in how we look at the statistics and how the state looks at our successes. One of the outcomes that the state is becoming increasingly interested in is the economic multipliers that education produces throughout the state, the impacts you have on the economy and in job growth. Taos has been very successful in its STEM programs, its health programs, in producing jobs that stay locally, and that's an important factor for all of us. This is another growth sort of indicator for this campus, is how many square footage you've been adding as you've gone along. Clara campus started with its first building in 1996, and you've grown now to over 54,000 square feet of educational buildings and support office buildings, as you know. The campus was originally in 10 locations. It's quickly moving down to 2 sites. Let me know if I'm going too fast. I normally don't read these slides as I go along, so if you need me to stop, or if anybody has a question, please just raise your hand and ask. Clara campus, in its growth, has begun to sort of form a cluster of buildings, and those buildings have the beginnings of wanting to have an exterior space that connects them all. So it's rather planning for a whole campus, begins to plan about how you move through the campuses and how you create gathering in areas that your students want to stay and experience as a whole. And Clara campus is beginning to reach that critical kind of mass where you have enough structure around it that those exterior spaces become important. So we've begun to do some planning in a broader sense for your campus. Now I'm going to dive into something that we like to call good times with a funding cycle at the state of New Mexico. It's an overview of the capital process in the state and where your funding comes for the infrastructure and the buildings that you create or remodel on the campus. We have 3 ways of creating funding in the state for capital projects. There's minor and major capital projects, but primarily I'll be talking about a major capital project, which would be a building. You can use your state severance tax fund, which basically comes from investment revenues from our natural gas resources. So those funds will fluctuate in their availability as we go through different cycles of how well our oil and gas revenues are flowing into the state. The other way is through general obligation bonds. Those bonds are voted on every even year. This is a bond year. On November 4th, Clara campus, or Taos, has a stake in this coming bond. We'll be asking for some money for the health, give me the name of that building again, the Health Sciences Group for nursing and your health education. That bond is on November 4th. We really hope you'll go out and vote for it. And I should say that Taos County also carries quite a bit of weight because you all as a whole tend to vote for those bonds, which shows to the state legislature that you have a lot of support for education and a lot of support for this campus. Our other funding mechanism is local funds, which Mario can probably speak to better than I can. So the combination of these are what we use to improve campuses, existing buildings, or create or do remodels or additions to them. They come out in small pieces, and we have to ask for those funding through the state mechanisms each year. They also, when we receive funding, they require the general match is 25% for local money for the branch campuses. You've received and been successful in some of these requests. You've had several funding through GO bonds and also severance years. If you kind of scan this, I think I may have not been able to pick one or two of your earlier funding pieces up, but the majority of your development here has come dollar-wise through the state. You can also see what's highlighted here in red is often you'll go forward with a request, and somewhere along the line, the state will deny it. So you start all over from square one. So it's the Health Career Training Center. We're requesting $4 million, and that's what's going to be on the GO bond for Clower Campus this year for UNM Taos. This is a basic outlay of how the capital process works for the branch campuses that first have to move their requests through a planning process, which I work in, through a development of the scope of work based on what type of educational requirements you have. So, for instance, should one of the branches come forward and say, we need more classrooms? We don't just write down you need more classrooms and thumbnail a price to it. We actually go about planning for what type of those classrooms are and if you really need them. If it's something that is just a scheduling problem, we'll attack it that way first. The idea is that we have ever shortening budgets in this state. We have ever tightening amounts of funds that can be spread around the state for education. So we're beginning to look at alternative resources than capital projects. We kind of had a heyday that crashed with the recession, and we're suffering that. So the capital planning process begins with the type of sort of request or the pinch points where you can't meet your sort of educational goals and missions. You begin to move forward into planning. How do we begin to make up for those shortfalls if it's a facility that's required? It moves from planning into the Office of Capital Projects, which Eric helps with coming up with reasonable budgets. Those budgets are then examined UNM-wide with a capital planning group that looks at all of the requests from all of the branches, all of the auxiliaries that we have, and then the general condition and requests from main campuses as well as Health Sciences Center. So you're part of a large building community. Then they kind of balance that with whether are we in a severance tax year or are we in a GO bond year? Will this request be going forward for severance taxes? Because that means smaller amounts of money. So you don't want to bring forward very large projects that you'll have to break into millions of little pieces to get enough to build with. Eric will be able to talk about timelines once we receive funding, because you have a window of opportunity to spend the money in. It's sort of a long, complicated process, I think, is where I'm headed with this. The objective of the capital outlay planning is so that we can come up with 5-year plans. And 5-year plans take in all of the campus requirements as well as the needs for the facilities. We have, at main campus, you have a huge amount of buildings that are 50 and 70 years old, so that they're crumbling around our ears, as well as they're not able to meet the demands for a student who has a cell phone and can access information the way you do on smartboards here. So there's sort of the balance of how we ask for a smaller piece of pie each time. That goes through the capital planning and budgeting process, which is the provost, the president, and the facilities folks are all involved in, as well as the budget office. We then take those requests each year in the summer, and your director comes forward and presents for Taos for the request for the year before the higher education department. Higher education department then filters it through their sense of what they feel would be a reasonable overall state request, because they're getting the requests from all of the universities and branch campuses as well as community colleges across the state. So it's always look at how much the guess is would be available for that funding, and how do we ever further slice the pie. We then, as the process winds forward, it goes forward, eventually ends up before the legislature after it goes through the finance committee. Then it ends up before the legislature, a vote is taken, and it's part of the budget that moves forward. It's either, again, a GO bond year or a severance tax year. This is GO bond because it's even. Odd years are severance tax bills. The bill then goes trickling on forward to the governor's desk and is either cut, signed, and moved forward. The funding then, if we receive any funding for our projects, or if we receive portions of funding for the projects, then the money can be drawn down at the following, let's see, legislature votes, and then we pull the funding down in August or September, isn't that right? It's the beginning of the next fiscal year. So the whole process from glimmer in your eye to getting funding, or even partial funding, that's a 2-year cycle, approximately. Currently, and I'm sort of alluded to this, is because of the recession and the overall economy, higher education as a whole, and certainly our branch campuses are feeling this, have been challenged with reductions, budgetary reductions across the board. It affects our capital project planning. It affects how long it takes for us to amass funding for these projects as we move forward, because you're getting smaller pieces of funding when you receive it. So the challenges have been to both, how do we balance limited resources across the state, but how do we balance them for the University of New Mexico as we're having higher and increasing demands by our students. Our students expect more out of the facilities and the infrastructure we provide, both in IT and both in the kind of amenities they would see on a campus. And yet our budgets are tightening. So there's been a balancing act going on for a while. There have been other, I think I've got a slide on this. So we're back to how the process seems to work in my mind. Is you're going through and you're doing all the preliminary planning, and then there's this balancing of what we think the state might be able to have. There's a lot of lobbying going on, a lot of asking going on. So you go through, HED passes it, and they more than likely make their first cut at what we believe the budget is. So Eric and our group and OCP work together to come up with what the budget should be, and then you get your first cut. That's usually the case. Then HED makes their recommendations to the Department of Finance and the Legislative Finance Committee, and they'll begin to balance again, and there's often another cut that comes forward. So meanwhile, you're coming forward to the legislature, and there's an opportunity for them to cut it again, as well as the governor. So we often end up with budgets that have, by the time we receive our first dollop of funding, have been cut as much as 50%. So you have to always be nimble enough to, how do I reinvest this money to, for instance, for this coming GEO bond, how do I produce what I decided we planned for our education we needed for the health sciences group if I have less money than I needed? So we often end up with phased projects. We end up with reinvesting in partial remodels. I'm currently involved in redoing the chemistry building. We originally asked for $28 million. We have $16 million. So we had to focus strategically on what we could redo. So we're redoing the infrastructure of the building and 2 floors of research labs. So just to give you an idea. There was also, and we're still playing a little bit of catch up from this. In 2010, the governor froze our building renewal funds. They used to be based on how much square footage we had, which was a formula decision. And they'd always fluctuate the formulas a little bit, but at least we had a pool of money that we knew we could put back into repairing our buildings. Because as they age, they need to be updated. HVACs are always needing redo. We're trying to remodel and upkeep our buildings so they'll meet with the pedagogy today. Since they're frozen, what we'll begin to have to plan for and understand is that we're going to begin to have to ask for capital dollars to do what's deferred maintenance, because that dollar keeps climbing because we can't meet all of the maintenance demands each year. So that's something we'll have to factor in going forward for our capital improvements budgets, is how do we just maintain what we have. So this is where I think I'm going to have Jim jump in, because once we get our capital dollars approved, my planning part begins to say, how do we really program this building? And then Jim and folks from OCP work on your campus to proceed to get the funding drawn down.
Okay. Year 2, this is really real. Can everybody hear me? Rudy? Good. Okay. So we've gone through this process now where we've identified the need for a building and we've vetted it and we've looked at it upside down and estimated it and gone through all of these steps to get it approved. And once it gets approved, it has probably been cut up, but we have to turn it into reality, because at this point there's no drawings. It's all a concept. There are some estimates, there's some specifications that we need X number of classrooms or X number of laboratories. But we haven't gone out and spent a whole lot of money to get really firm quotations to do this, because we don't have the money in the first place. The project isn't approved. So it's got to be converted into reality. Almost every time the funding that we receive is less than what we requested. Now you would think that the smart person would ask for 10 million when they need 5 million. Doesn't work that way, because you have to justify everything you ask for all the way along the line. So the reality is, when you get less money, you can produce less, or you have to find more money somewhere else to be able to do the job. And before these funds can be spent, you remember that slide that Toddy had with all those points along the line that we had to hit and get approval on? It literally starts all over again, because now you've turned it into reality. Now you have some hard numbers and some hard figures and some hard costs. And since the money has generally been approved at that point, this approval is, we need to make sure you're spending it the way we agreed that you would get it. How did the legislature grant the money? And you have to be sure you're not spending parking lot money on a new building, and vice versa. So the process goes all over again. HED, the Department of Higher Education, and the DFA, the Department of Finance Authority, are reviewing these needs to make certain we're spending it properly. It is public money, and it's proper that these people should do that. See if I can get the next slide here. This is a planning and programming guide that was developed for the Student Success Center that you're standing in right now. I think Eric developed this probably last September. I want to say to you that at the point we're at right now with the Student Success Center, we've got the ground level, the utilities have been moved, we have gone out for proposals for construction costs. We'll see them in several weeks. We are at point number 48 of those steps in that process. 48 points had to be hit so far and approvals granted to make it move along. That's why right now we're at this point with 13 to go, and we're just over 2 years into the process. 2 years. I swear to you, this is going to be a 4-year process before we open these doors here, because we still have a lot of work to do. The planning process. Well, I'm really in love with all these medieval slides. I don't know if you can all notice them back there, but you should try to go online when this is available. Thanks to Toddy for all of them. Toddy, do you want Eric, or would you like to do this? This looks like your department, planning and campus development.
Me. The medieval references come because we just went before HED, and everybody in my office calls it the Inquisition. So it came to mind when I was doing this. There's a point I want to make that while Jim was talking that came to mind. I want to say when I'm working with the branches that Taos campus has been really impressive on how they spend their dollars. And they've been really nimble. In other words, not getting stuck on just one kind of facility vision. If an opportunity comes forward, they've seized it. And I think you can see it in some barracks here, which is a fast solution, and it's an inexpensive solution for much needed educational space. And I applaud them for it, because a lot of our administrators at Maine could certainly not think out of the side of the box the way that Taos does, and it's gotten you where you are. So I'd like to kind of further introduce what planning and campus development does, because you'll see me prowling around this campus for years to come, I hope. And what we do is, I kind of outlined a little of it, but we come up with sort of the facilities plans for you as you move along. We work with the individual stakeholders on a campus. That can include the administrators all the way to the students or the people outside of the community who may be coming into the building. So we're planning for, or the campus as a whole we're planning for. We do studies to look for also alternatives to buildings. As budgets tighten, we begin to look for other ways to solve space problems. So my job has become from master planning all the way down to operational planning and scheduling even. Some of those are the new solutions we look for. We start every project with a needs assessment. When somebody calls our office and says, I need 6 more offices, the needs assessment begins, because we have to make sure you actually need those offices. And more time than not, I would say on main campus, we find alternative solutions. It's sort of right when you're in the thick of something and living in an environment, you don't always look at the broader solutions. So planning and campus development tries to do that. Our group is conjoined with a group of other folks. Space management, some of you may have been involved in looking online at our famous data. We track all of the square footage across all of the campuses. It helps with making funding decisions. It helps with us making and understanding what our building renewal costs will be. It helps us understand and utilize better condition reports as we move forward. Space management also has requirements that all of the campuses have to meet. In other words, the biggest one that I get the hugest howls from is there are not 500 square foot offices. There are office regulations that we have based on not just the type of user, but the overall campus conjoined planning. So we have those type of space regulations, and we're now developing even more in-depth ones that are linked to our types of budgets and resources we have, particularly targeting right now research dollars. So we'll be looking at doing conjoined spaces and looking at research dollar to square footage, because they all carry costs. We also work with the UNM landscape architect, which Jim will speak a little bit, has worked with this campus and come up with a concept as you move forward to a centralized landscaping plan for the campus. And the university architect is in our group. The current architect is an interim. Our most recent architect left to go back home in the Midwest. The position of the UNM architect is to sort of safeguard that all of our campuses have a conjoined sort of identity. They work on main campus with historic preservation, and their sort of broader public face of the university is to help us with HED requests and administer how we move forward with those. This gets back to space guidelines. UNM governs the capital project process. UNM Maine does, and the branches work through OCP, Office of Capital Projects, when things are funded, planning to get to those stages. We also have norms and regs as to how things are built. IT is involved in regulations. The physical plant has come up with operational procedures for buildings, those type of things. All of those get bundled in how we plan for a building. This is a little overview sheet of how many square feet we allow presidents, directors, and deans to have. And I'm the person that tells them no. We also have developed other guidelines. There's norms for classroom equipment now and layouts for classrooms, because as I was saying, we're looking at how do we conserve space. We do it by having flexible space norms. And OCP gets involved in furnishing. How much furniture do we have that's flexible? Well, do we do big round tables? I'll tell you what, at UNM we don't anymore because it takes up too much square footage that students could be sitting in. So we're doing smaller octagonal tables that can fit together for those types of group study. And we've done a guideline. Most of these you can find on Planning and Campus Development. There's norms and guidelines are all published. So the idea is, how do you conserve space but allow for the different types of pedagogies that our students are now coming to expect in the classroom? Group study. We also have state guidelines. The most sort of biggest one that comes to mind is our energy. We have to meet energy standards over certain square footage. Most new buildings have to adhere to it. We have to have 50% less energy use in buildings, as well as meet LEED Silver as a minimum. All of these things take into account when we're planning and designing. The current process, as I said, is we begin to look for alternatives to additions and building and remodels. We begin to say, what can we do to make our spaces more functional? One of the ways is to change how the furniture goes before you do an addition. Can I use this space for a conference room? Can I also use it for a seminar room? Is it a scheduling problem I'm really seeing? We did an early analysis. This is we did that last year, of seeing how Clara campus is utilizing its current classroom space. Across the norm across the country is that if you hit 60% utilization targets for higher education, you're right in the norm. And so that's what UNM tries to hit. If you notice, you guys need some barracks. You need more classroom space here. In some of your areas, you're overtopping the 60% utilization. When we love that, we realize that you're getting out of your sort of comfort zones for when people are coming to classes when you're doing that. So it's this balancing act. You want to have higher targeted rates of use in your classes, but you also want to make sure you're allowing your students to get to classes. So we look at peak hours, flexible designs, dual space use. Am I designing touchdown pad space for professors that are only here 2-3 times a week? Can they share offices? Certainly. We also look at the fun one at UNM Maine is, what do you do with the emeriti that's really just been storing old bugs in his 150 square foot office for the last 10 years? So we also, the big one is we look at phasing our building plans, because as budgets get smaller, we have to look at how do we do phase 1, 2, and 3. So we're looking at more additions, we're looking at smaller footprints. We're looking at all of it. The current planning process, we've kind of gone through some of this, but UNM Taos is hitting the big one right now. They've just developed, and as Kate mentioned, your strategic plan. You should look at it. It's online. It's the core to all planning. A strategic plan, whether it's for a university or whether it's for a business, it takes into account where you want to be in 5 to 10 years. And it looks at what your core mission is, what you're trying to achieve, and it breaks it down into little doable pieces. The planning that I work with then takes the strategic plan and measures everything we do against it. It says, does this, if we make this move for a capital project, does it produce more? If part of your strategic plan is to produce more degrees in a certain department, then I have to ask, will this have that outcome? And that's how we get guidance as planners for capital projects to see where we want to go with your buildings. They break down pretty much into, we tie it to academic plans for UNM. We tie it to facility needs, so where are you most bursting at the seams, and how does that fit in with where you want the university to go? And then eventually, if the solution is a capital project, we come up with a capital project facility plan. But I say big if, because it's not always the first thing we look for. This is sort of a breakdown of what you look for in capital planning. You're looking at identifying the goals of the institution. You're trying to package it into what type of facilities and growth do you see, and how do you meet those growth demands. This is something that planners always like to put up because it makes us feel more important. I couldn't read that to you or care about it, to be honest. It's a chiclet slide. So, I had mentioned that we develop 5-year capital projects plans. We also submit those to the state. Taos has one. Those are moving targets pretty much. Those alter quite a bit. The state has only recently been requiring a full 5 and 10-year plan. The capital planning project group at UNM Maine vets them each year, and we resubmit them each year. It becomes sort of a roadmap for them as they begin to plan about how much facilities dollars they're going to be looking at in the future. Once we have those capital plans in place, we begin to develop the project scopes, again, looking at budgets. So we begin that budgeting cycle now, not just for 1 year, but into 5 years. These are the steps for a facility project. So once that you get on those facilities lists for capital projects, we begin to zero into the budgets, the scopes of work. We begin to develop a whole integrated plan for it, and looking at how do we, if we need to, where are the breakpoints to phase these projects. So after we've broken everything into their mini strategic plans, I like to think of it as, is this meeting the goal of the university? Is the facility going to get there? How do we get the facility built? We come up with a comprehensive 5 and 10-year plan for each of the branches, main campus, or each of the academic units. Currently, and currently by a blink of an eye, I mean just last week I think, we started speaking to your Department of Instruction about some of their sort of cramped space needs. Your auxiliary and your administration, we're just beginning to look at what those needs are and how we might begin to solve some of those things. So you'll see me floating around here asking a lot of questions. Can't make your clicker work. This is sort of the meat and potatoes part. Jim and Eric will discuss what's going on now with all of the machines buzzing around and what you see up on these boards.
This is actually the exciting part. Now it's about us. It's not about what we have to do to get there. So, and as you can see with all the dirt and all the noise that you missed while you were gone this summer, maybe some of you didn't miss it, the noise and the vibration. We're at a point right now where we have put the Student Success Center in this picture. We're here in this building right now, and this is the proposed addition. You're standing in the remodel of the Student Success Center. Right now, the work we did this summer was to move the utilities so they would no longer be under the building, and we prepared the pad, and we prepared what you'll see in just a moment will be a new driveway, which will be to access the Student Success Center. For the time being, it'll function as a construction laydown area. So the construction crews for these next 2 semesters will have their own entrances, and they should not be bothering anything else on the campus. Toddy mentioned that the strategic plan is something that's really, really critical here, but there's one other plan, and that's called the master plan. The strategic plan is what do we need, where do we think we're going, and the master plan is a physical description of what we think that looks like on the ground. And I don't believe we printed up a copy of where that master plan, this is an architectural plan, stands at the moment. I'm sorry I didn't bring it. But Eric, if you could grab that board right behind you, next one back. It's where we started. We didn't start at the building. We went back and we took a look at the master plan, and we tried to look at how it's going to get landscaped and how this building is going to fit into that plan. So if I can take your imagination for a moment, this is the Arts Building, Pueblo Hall, Snack Bar. This is the new addition that's going on our building. The driveway isn't shown here because this is from the landscape architect. That driveway is right here. This is a new projected landscape plan with walkways that will go between the buildings, come from the parking lot, go across what I want to start referring to here as our commons area. The commons area is when you step outside the snack bar between those 2 buildings and you look to Taos Mountain. And our intention here is to keep this absolutely natural as much as we can, and to make all of the seating spaces and walking spaces blend into the landscape that's out there. We do not want to be touching anything else that's out here. So if you have time later, there's a conceptual central landscape plan back here. Toddy, that may be in our slides. Hard to read. It lists some of the concepts that our university architect used to come up with this design in the first place, and what her parameters were and what she was trying to achieve. And it was developed not only working with our architectural company, but also with staff, and actually input from others. Here we go. Rudy, can you read this in the back? You're all the way in back. All right. So what we were trying to do was to keep the existing features of the landscape and let that be the lead for the design. And as I mentioned, it's basically to keep that view to the north and keep this downward slope away from Pueblo Hall. Some of you may have raised your eyebrows when you saw the driveway that was drawn in here a second ago, because it looks like a big thing right in the way, but this driveway is down at a lower elevation. So if you get up on top outside the snack bar tonight or tomorrow and take a look at it, you'll see that this basically falls away and doesn't do anything to interfere with the look. And mainly, we want to leave the arroyos alone. We want to leave all the natural drainage and try and complement it. So we're adding 7,600 square feet to the existing Padre Martinez Hall. This is the addition of the space. It's basically designed to provide student study and gathering spaces. Our goal here is to support the students in meeting their academic goals and their certificate and degree completion. We're trying to create a program here that promotes persistence until graduation or until they transfer to a 4-year program. This one-stop shopping center, this one-stop student services center is going to cover admissions, enrollment assistance, counseling, financial aid, advising, new student orientation, graduation activities, student activities, business and financial management, and we believe at this moment in time administration will also move down here. This is the concept of what the building's going to look like. This is the existing building right here, right at that line. Everything else, everything else is the addition. So the driveway comes in, has a limited number of parking, a cul-de-sac, a drop-off area. What's not shown and what was in that other drawing is the way the walkways come in and start to incorporate. This is a layout you can't see from back there. You better look at it online or come up a little bit later and take a look at it. These are some projections of what we think the inside of the building is going to look like. It's pretty unique. Very, very open space. These rooms that we're in right now are going to be remodeled, renovated. They will, instead of being 8 classrooms, they will be 4 classrooms. And they will be 4 classrooms, large classrooms, that can open up into one large space for those sorts of assembly activities that we have. So here's the 4 spaces with different, more effective and quiet dividers than what we have right now. I'm sure all the faculty members who've taught in here are appreciative of that. Administration offices and a conference room will be over on this side of the building, which is back here where Larry Torres' office used to be. This is representative of lab. I think the room number was 115 at that time, which we've already started to take apart. This is the main entrance to the building. All of Patricia's activities, all of the student service activities that we have will be down along this corridor. There's a central station for people to come in and check in and talk about the service that they need or where they need to go, like a receptionist desk, if you like, and somebody that can direct them to the right source. The rest of the area is student study, student gathering area. People who are out there studying or just talking, or perhaps studying together, will be mixed in with people who are waiting for an appointment for financial aid or waiting for an advisor of one sort or another. There's probably a lot of questions on this, but are there any general ones that anybody has before I move off the floor plan? Okay. I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm really proud of these or not. They're clever. You can see the first portable as it moved in. And right now, they're supporting this remodel. They're adding space for us to move people out of these 4 large spaces. All of the classes that occur in these spaces will be able to go over to those portable buildings in 2 to 3 weeks. They'll be ready to go. The short-term advantages of this is it allows us to empty the whole building so construction can go on and everything can be remodeled. And upgrade these classrooms. Will save money by not having to phase the construction as we've had to do in the past. Doing that stage first and then this stage and having safety issues. It will also avoid disrupting classroom schedules. The long-term advantages are when it's all over, we've got approximately 3,600 square feet of classroom space. Something that we're obviously never in excess here. Next big thing coming along, of course, is, as you've heard, the Downtown Civic Center. The Health Services Career Center. Right now, you may have read in the paper, we are under contract with the town of Taos to buy that building for $1. During this interim period, it has to pass certain inspections and certain examinations before we all decide to buy it. Most importantly, however, is the fact that we want to make sure we have the funding in place to be able to do it. If we don't have the funding to totally remodel that building, we're still going to continue to use it as educational space. We're just not going to be able to invest in the infrastructure in that building. We've already gone to a point where we have validated the condition of the building and the suitability for our use. We've developed construction costs and project costs. We've looked at all of the deferred maintenance on that building. You've probably driven by and seen all the stucco falling off and seen all the issues on the outside. We have examined them all. We have estimated the costs to do it, and we've developed a budget to be able to accomplish it. We've also been through the Board of Regents for our approvals. We've been through HED, and I believe we've been through State Board of Finance in general yet? No. Okay. We developed a documentation for HED and for State Board of Finance to consider it when we're ready to do it. We've completed a Phase 1 environmental study, so we know what we have to do to the building, and it's not very much. We've done our surveys, our title commitments. Eric and his crew came up, I think, last October, and we did a thorough vetting of the building. We got everybody from IT to physical plant to electrical people to get up on the roof and go through every nook and cranny and find out what we had to do to bring it up to date. All before we accepted the contract. This is really critical. November 4th. This $4 million is in the GO bond bill. It's a capital project bill for the whole state. We all sink or we all swim together. But we've got to get the vote out to be able to do it. I believe, is there still another veto possible? No. This is it. It's a big one. Okay. So one of those times we can't be turned down. The nursing program and related health services programs are going into the building. And right now what we've designed for it is the nursing program. Some of you, are you all aware we've got this, the third cohort graduated with a 100% rate and passed their license exams? Third, 100%. Of all of the things that I've worked on since I've been here in just a few years, this nursing program and where we're teaching it right now is probably the most critical problem we have. It's the most successful program, sorry, all the other departments, in my opinion, it's one of the most successful programs we have by many different measures in terms of what it does. And it is the most overcrowded facility that we have. They're currently operating in 4,500 square feet, and the nursing program is lucky if it gets to use 2,000 square feet of that 4,500 square feet. I'm told there are a couple of occasions where the classes need to be taught in the hallways. Dawn, is that correct?
Well, not in the hallways, but they do their physical assessments, and they're learning how to do that. Usually that's on the bed or something. But they do that on the floor.
We have to, when we did a layout for what it would take for the existing program without giving it very much expansion, that 4,500 square feet went to well over 12,000 square feet. That's why this building is basically dedicated to it. So in addition to the associate degree in nursing program, it's also going to cover our certified nursing program, our CNA program, the emergency medical training, emergency medical services training, integrated health and holistic healing programs. Science and math educational facilities are in there. There's still a biology lab that's going to be in that building. And quite a few class and seminar rooms. So again, we need to get this thing passed before we can proceed with it. If this passes in November, I believe we can start to spend some money probably by April, if that sounds right. And it'll probably be a year after that before everything is completed. There's a layout here somewhere, Toddy, people can look at. Right now, we are using the commercial kitchen. If you've been in the Civic Center, we're using the commercial kitchen, and we're using all of Rio Grande Hall. At this moment, none of the program that we've laid out, nor any of the money, will let us stretch into Baton Hall. That's all to come later. Well, I'm going to just close with a couple of other notes and then turn it over to the strategic plan. Toddy mentioned exterior spaces. One of the things that's kind of driven me a little crazy since I've started this job was how everything that was here before me was incomplete. There was no landscaping, the parking lots weren't paved, the parking was inadequate, the lighting barely stretched around, there was no comfortable place to go sit and to go relax. All of these plans that I've seen so far are all driven by connecting that exterior space and making this a campus. Somewhere in one of these slides we talked about how your impressions of most campuses, of universities that you go to, are the campus, they're the exterior. What do you feel as you go between building to building, and what do you feel, how does it make you feel when you go outside? We're finally going to see that happen in these plans. EGRT, boy, what a lifesaver. This is local money. Every 10 years, so far, this is the second time for 10 years. I'll let Dr. O'Neill explain it in a little bit more detail. We've passed this bill, and it grants, we get 25%, I believe, of the total educational GRT fund here in Taos County. I don't think any other county in the state has it, just Taos County. And it typically turns out to be funding that we need to stretch for 10 years, because it's going to be 10 years before that comes around again, before that bond issue expires, and may or may not come up for renewal at that point in time. We've been able to, I think, Fred Peralta probably deserves a pat on the back every time you see him, whether you agree with his politics or not. He really made this happen, and he made the renewal happen. Senator Cisneros and Representative Gonzalez need all the encouragement we can get, because they help us push every program through and really keep us from a lot of cuts. We could suffer from a lot more cuts than we see, but thanks to these two, we generally get them through. Lastly, I'll close on the cuts. I always hear, sometimes hear on campus, why we didn't just build a bigger building, or why we just didn't take all this into consideration at one time. When you start to plan something, you look at what your future needs are and how you're going to address them, and you try to look as far ahead as you can. And you can see from this process, we're already working right now on what we think we need 5 years from now, and 4 years from now, and 3 years from now. And sometimes the thing that we identified as being 5 years out, by the time we get closer to it, the need has changed. The enrollment has changed. Some academic requirement, or perhaps some administrative function, has strained to a point where we need to change. We need to do something slightly different. I was looking over all these numbers the other day, trying to figure out how have they done this. They go in and they look for $3 to $4 million to build a building, and they get $800,000. What are you supposed to do with that? You can't say no thank you, and you can't go back and say, what am I supposed to do with it? You have to come up with a plan to do it. As I look at the way the Early Child Education Center got built, the way Pueblo Hall got built, and the Tech Center right now is probably another really good example here. These things all occurred in stages, and they occurred with the amount of funding that was available at the time. They certainly didn't match what people requested and what they wanted to do academically. As I was looking these numbers over the other day, I was likening it to when I was a young father. And sometimes when you've got a family and money is tight, and you start looking at what you're going to do and what you need, and you were expecting a $200 or $300 check at the end of the month, and it doesn't come through, but you've got $40. So sometimes you have to choose and buy your son some shoes instead of buying your daughter a dress or something else. Doesn't mean you love any particular program or any particular child any more or any less. It just means you have to work with what you've got, and you have to look at your list of needs and use it as best you can. So, any questions on what I've done so far? What Eric or Toddy have done? Wow. Okay. Dr. O'Neill?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. I want to give an acknowledgement to the president of the UNM Taos Advisory Board, David Chavez, who's joined us today. I know he's got a busy schedule, so I just wanted to thank you very much, Dr. Chavez, for being here. I know you also know the faculty perspective, but we really appreciate your being here as well. So thank you. So Toddy, Jim, thank you. Appreciate that. And I just wanted to follow up with a couple of things. When you talked about the 5-year plan, the strategic plan, and so forth, we have that for the campus. We have this presentation today that has been put together as an addendum, if you will, to that strategic plan. But again, to go back to November, sometimes we can forecast a bit. In this case, we have two huge variables, the GeoBond and the downtown buildings, and how we plan from there is, it's a big pivot, either one of those. So again, I just want to reiterate, keep that November 4th date in mind, and we really, really appreciate your support for all of that. I want to echo the support of our local legislators, our advisory board, and I also want to underscore the whole, the support that we get from the faculty and staff. You all deal with all these conditions every day, being flexible. I joke that we have a roll of duct tape in one hand and baling wire in the other, but Rudy and the physical plant team, Patricia and her team, Randy and her team, all of you who are here, we really appreciate your flexibility and just your willingness to adjust as we need to in terms of our classrooms, our office space, and so forth. We are looking at, I think in the next 2 years, as Jim said, it's going to be a sea change in terms of how we see the campus evolving, and that's an exciting thing to witness. So stay tuned. Along the lines of the strategic plan, again, this slideshow that you're seeing today will also be linked to the web. I know it's hard to read a lot of this, but we'll have that information available for you to go over in more detail. And this is a living document, the strategic plan. It is really something that is a baseline that we seek to work from. It is based on the input from everyone across campus. And the fact that we're having this meeting here today is in part in direct response to folks saying, we want to know more about what's going on around campus. And so the meeting on September 4th with Dr. Winograd and Delgado Riley, that'll be downtown, but that's a specific meeting on the strategic plan. But again, we hear you. We hear that you want more information about what's going on, and these are growing pains, if you will. We're sort of too big at this point to just run into each other in the hall and be able to say what's going on. So, this is, in my memory, the first time we've done something like this, had it videotaped to put online. So, thank you for the suggestion, and thanks for bearing with us as we grow and as we renovate and remodel. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Toddy, and we'll see where we go. Do you have more, Toddy, I should ask?
We were just going to do an overview of the strategic plan.
Okay. So you're, in terms of facilities, you're wrapped up? Okay. All right. So with that, I'll just underscore that if you haven't had a chance to look at that, we had a number of copies printed. I think Anna has some printed copies available. We gave those out on Saturday, but again, please look it over and come on September 4th and be prepared to ask questions of Drs. Winograd and Delgado Riley. I think you'll find that it's a really extensive document in terms of looking at our past, looking at where we're at now, and then really operationalizing about 7 areas in terms of where we're going to focus our energies. And as folks have said, some of that is driven by the state funding formula. It used to be that we were funded based on enrollment, based on student credit hours, things like that. We still are. That's still important. But more and more they're looking at half a dozen or so performance measures, and that includes things like how many students are on Pell, how many students are in STEM courses, how many students are retained semester to semester, how many students graduate, and things like that. So you'll see all of that in there. I think actually we're doing an amazing job, given those variables, already. The thing that we have to look at is really how those are likely to change from year to year. If we have nursing students, dental hygiene students, both graduating in the same year, that's likely to give us a graduation bump, and then it might look like we're dropping the next year, when really it's a matter of the cycle. So that's one thing. But we're also, as we're growing, we're looking at really being more thoughtful about how we do things, really looking at the data, really looking at who our students are, how we can best help them. So for instance, this semester we spent a lot of time really looking at our returning students, our new students, not just advising students, but making sure that we're talking to the business office. Are there financial aid issues? Rosina and Victoria and I were just up in Cuesta this morning with Senator Udall's office and a number of folks from the Cuesta area and federal agencies trying to work with those 300 folks that were laid off up in Cuesta. So we have a number of those who are going to be taking courses with us this fall. But in particular, they were thanking UNM Taos, whether it's the commercial driver's license training or IT or other programs. The arts were mentioned, natural resources. I think there was a really good understanding of who we are here at UNM Taos and what we can help provide. So I want to thank you all, again, everybody who's here in this room, everybody who's watching this. This really is a testament to all of you and all the work that's going into all of these processes. So thank you, and I'm going to turn it back to Toddy.
So I think we'll just give you a little teaser on the strategic plan. Again, you can find it online. We suggest you read it. It's your roadmap. It was based on discussions and listening, primarily, listening to the campus, what its needs were. And it was in partnership, or they brought in the Center of Educational Policy Research to help guide the process of developing this strategic plan. In talking to the community, which is your campus, the recommendations were broken into areas that needed strengthening. So the sort of touch points that they began to plan from was that they're strengthening communication, campus safety arose as an issue, dual credit articulation, facilities and space were a touch point, strengthening the main campus and Taos campus relationships, faculty, staff, and student recognition, professional development, data collection, and use. So it's the listening process then begins to turn into how do we create a strategy that will promote sort of preparing and enveloping those areas that we need to strengthen. They've developed a mission for the campus. The mission and the vision are what are the drivers of the plan. So the mission is for UNM Taos becomes providing quality educational opportunities that transform the lives of our students, enriches the cultural life of our diverse communities, and strengthens the regional economy. The vision, which falls from the mission, is UNM Taos will be recognized in New Mexico and regionally as an educational leader and partner committed to providing a high-quality learning environment for all, students, pathways to higher education, relevant, rewarding careers, and personal growth opportunities. So it's taking the overall mission and bringing it into the student. The purpose begins to outline the initiatives into the strategic plan. How do we strategize using the resources we have and the resources we plan on acquiring to best create and make those missions and visions happen? The purpose is as an open access student-centered, I'm going to read a lot of this because I understand you can't see it in the back. Affordable college offering, dual credit, basic skills transfers, career technical, workforce training, and lifelong learning courses and programs. UNM Taos is committed to providing academic programs culminating in the awarding of associate degrees and transfers. providing career technical programs leading to certificates and degrees for students who seek career-related employment in business, industry, government, and healthcare, providing opportunities for students to acquire the verbal, qualitative, and cognitive skills necessary for a successful transition into college-level study, providing effective academic advisement and career counseling, diagnostics and placement testing, financial aid, and human development opportunities readily accessible to all students, and providing non-credit continuing adult education services to the community in business and professional training, professional development, cultural enrichment, and recreational activities. For all of you, I'm sure you can understand how that is what you're all doing right now. I mean, that's how your curriculum is based, it's how your organizational body is based, it's how you're divided into what sectors to meet that goal. It forms what you're doing academically, basically. The strategic plan then focuses on 7 goals to strengthen the campus and the commitment to the students. Student success, retention, and graduation, goal 1. Career pathways, dual credit early college, campus safety and security, fiscal stability and human resources, communication, campus culture and community outreach, facilities planning, campus environment, institutional effectiveness. Those are the goals of the strategic plan. Your strategic plan, I must say, is brilliant. It has the holy grail for a planner. It takes those goals and then it assigns measurable tasks to meet them. That's often why Jim and I come from a similar background. I started in planning by sitting on a planning and zoning board, and I can measure in the height of my houses I've lived in, the amount of master plans I've worked on that got dropped on a shelf. And they get dropped on a shelf because they don't make this critical step. They say, how are we going to implement this? And so you have a very clear roadmap that all of you will be assigned portions of to follow, and it'll give you the direction to meet your goals. So each goal has, you'll see it in the heart of the plan. Each goal is spelled out in a specific objectives and activities. They're action items. It's a roadmap. It's a task list. It actually has timelines, and it is assigned them to people or to positions. It's assigned them to groups of people to work on. And then it measures them. It says, is this creating the outcome we wanted? Is it tackling the goal or tackling what we felt were things we needed to strengthen? And it's broken into specific divisions. You'll see it as you move through the plan. The plan is based on a 5-year plan, so they become living documents. So once you obtain a goal, you move on to the next one, and you begin to add them, you build onto them. Well, this got us this far, let's reevaluate and see how we meet the next group of hurdles. So the key to a strategic plan is to make it living and relevant, to continually work on it and to continually update it, to be, as I've complimented you all on, to be nimble with them. So this plan monitors your successes, but it also has people who will be responsible for it as it goes along. So all of us have to work together to make these plans work. And for me, as a facilities planner, it is a clear guide as to what we should be structuring for your campus development, and I thank you all for putting one together. So, that's it. Questions? Oh, here's something nice out of the plan. When you get a chance, read the end of the plan. It complements this campus as I do. It's a very healthy environment you're growing here. It's a vital campus, and it's well connected to the community, which is what you want. Thanks.
Toddy, thank you again, and Eric, thank you very much for being here. Jim Pollard has offered to stay for a bit and answer any questions you might have about any of these schematics. Before we break, you've got a opportunity if there are any questions for the whole group, but if it's anything specific, Jim has offered to stay and talk with folks about it. Again, this whole PowerPoint will be available online. The whole video will be available online. Thank you.